but I've been doing a lot of listening, a lot of watching, a lot of observing, and particularly in the area of men's work. I've been looking at a lot of different organizations, a lot of initiatives, and watching their language, at least in where I see them first engaging, say their audiences or their networks or the men that they hope to reach. And something really came up for me as, the P word is pretty important for me to talk about. And because the context in which men's work happens, and it's the systemic nature of the violence and the manipulation and the oppression and the unearned power that men generally operate from, and differently depending on different cultural groups, because racism, systemic racism, affects patriarchal power at some different levels, but all men are affected negatively by patriarchy and often have connections to it, to that P word. All right. I know a lot of men are afraid to say that word, so I just say P word, right? So hopefully we know what we're talking about, but we need to get at that. The thing that I've been seeing is, on one level, when I engage online and I see what's being talked about online by women and by queer folk, I hear them talking about men a lot. Of course, because men oppress women and the LGBTQ community very powerfully, daily, 24/7, 365, in some very violent and manipulative and emboldened ways. And they talk about it very clearly and concisely, with deep, multi-level emotions, all righteous, because they're just talking about their lived experiences. One of the things, as I look at how men communicate online, and often in real spaces too, I see that men do not mention women at all. At all. Even though women and the LGBTQ community, queer folk, trans folk, are the ones that we oppress very directly, and children too, and the earth too. But when men and women are talking, we talk about different things. And I think it's deeply, deeply, deeply problematic that men are not also mentioning women. Now, there's plenty of posts that I've seen, plenty of spaces that I've been in where men talk negatively about women. Yeah, that's the P word. That's a P word. We feel all up in our chest about it, that we have these perspectives about how women fall short of things. And by no means am I saying that women don't have issues, but a lot of times when women have issues, it's because they've been entrained and inculcated and gaslit by the P word. All right. But I think it's profound that men are not talking about women. We're not even mentioning women. We might be, very beautifully talking about the divine feminine. All right. Beautiful. And the divine masculine. But we're not mentioning women. Why are we not talking about women? Is that the doorway by which, if we mention women, that we have to look at, address, critique, and take accountability for with how we affect women in the world? Is that why we're not doing it? Are we afraid of that? Are we afraid of women holding up the mirror to men and saying what's real for them about us, so we don't even mention them? How is it that we can do men's work and not mention who we affect most deeply? As we allow silently many times, and there are groups that are doing some good work that are mentioning the P word, that are mentioning women and talking about advocacy in a really great way. Men Engage Alliance has been doing that and is doing that. That's very, very powerful. We need to look into that organization, join it, work with it, learn from it. And there are other organizations and groups and people and men too that are doing this. But by and large, a lot of the ones I've looked at, and I've been checking into some of their, workshops and things like that, just not mentioning women. It's very deeply problematic, because I think it's really stopping us from being accountable to our violence. All right? The hashtag Stop men's violence against women should not just be a hashtag. It should be a conversation. It should be work. It should be a deep part of men's work. An actual upfront piece that we talk about way more than we're talking about now. And I think a lot of us men are navel gazing right now. I think we're, that whole negative thing about, oh, we're all lonely and stuff like that. Oh, men's loneliness is really at the core of everything, which I don't think is true. Now, that doesn't mean that men aren't lonely. But it's the P word that says we shouldn't connect with other men. We're running around, crying and whining and waving the weapon of the P word, and then wondering why women and other folk are not running to us for the support and the protection that we say we're all about. That protection and guidance and whatever, we're going to provide for everybody on the earth, even though women do most of the productive work on the earth, around water carrying and, collection and food gathering and harvesting and so many other things. Don't even try it, with that. So many men are like, oh, we build the bridges, we do the thing, we make the roads and all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that's because you stop women from doing the things they can do. So, I'm sort of not here for that. Yes, do we need to engage that concept of loneliness? And some of it comes from a really authentic place, because yes, we have been affected as men from the P word, so, we kind of push back. We kind of think, oh, I can handle it. I'll just slide with this. I'll be okay. I'm just going to man up, Yeah, well, all right. Yeah. How's that working? We're not looking for support. We're not opening ourselves up to vulnerability, to strength in vulnerability and sensitivity of nurturing each other, nurturing ourselves, self-care, which includes, medical or health care. It doesn't have to be medical and doctors. A lot of times it just has to be, care, sleep, whatever it is, speaking up for what we need. But also what we need is to talk about our relationship with the groups that our gender group oppress daily, all the time. Even the good guys have problems, and I don't want to hear about that. Oh, I'm a good guy. I haven't slapped a woman in my life. Yeah, well, you didn't actually speak out against the P word either. You didn't actually support, women's right to body autonomy, and to reproductive health care, or trans people's, right to health care, and reproductive rights. Any of that. We haven't done that. We should be tripping over all the men's group that are, being led by, women's information and guidance and advocacy for them to fight the P word, to know what's going on, to know why they've been so vociferous, so outspoken about these things. So many of us still think feminism is a bad word. And yes, we can look at that, how white feminism has been white women's feminism has been problematic for women of color, for African black women, indigenous women, and other cultural groups of the global majority. We can have that conversation. But as we look at, how women have been telling us their lived experience, how they've been organizing and doing work, again, thank you to the Combahee River Collective. Thank you to the work, that all these women are doing around intersectionality, and, to Audre Lorde, to all these, women who have, bell hooks, who have done so much work to lay out a foundation for us men to learn from, even if it wasn't directly for us. We can learn for all this, and so many of it has been for us too, because they are looking to create foundations, new foundations for cultures that are not anti-culture, that are not at their core oppressive, and particularly by gender. But they've always talked about all of the oppressions, ableism and classism and all other things. So we've got to do better listening, and that means we have to raise our voices in support of women, of the queer community, for children, how children are responding to this world of, that is ensconced in the P word. So there's so much for us to do, but we have to start to look at why we don't mention them. How come we're not raising that issue? We act like, again, like they don't exist. You know, the P word dehumanizes women and those that do not abide or, you know, match with the, you know, the gender binary that, you know, patriarchy has helped to set up over thousands of years. Okay, we have to begin to listen to them, to not go into conversations defensively, but we have to start to advocate openly and talk about our relationships with women, talk about our relationships with others that the P word and us men oppress and create violence against, violent systems. The P word is systemic, it is global. You know, I will always suggest that men just take even a quick cursory look at a website called By the Numbers. You will find it. It comes up very easily. Maybe that's just my, you know, my browser because I look at it so often and share it so often. But I suggest that men do that. You can do that quietly. You can do it on the bus. You can do it on the train. You can do it on a plane. Just check that out, read it, see what's going on. But why are men not talking about women in men's work? I would like to know what you think. I would like to connect with your organizations, your groups, your men's work groups, your communities, where, of course, women and queer folk know that we need this work. I've been in those organizations. I've worked with some of these organizations that need this work. You know, and some of them have pushed back against that work, you know, when we finally get to talking about it. But it is something we need to engage, and that men need to learn to engage with strength and sensitivity and power and vulnerability, the strength in our vulnerability. So I'd love to have these conversations with organizations, with groups. I do one-on-one, one-to-one work with men and with others, you know, around issues of oppression and power and liberation. So please get in touch with me. I can be reached at my email, most easily ukumbwa@gmail.com, UKUMBWA. And please check out my link tree, which has testimonials, more information, things I've done, things I'm hoping to do. And one of the things I'm hoping to do is talk to you. So I hope we can do that. Let's talk.